With your host, Andrew Donaldson. This is Heard Tell.
Looks like a Heard Tell. He's back, our favorite public defender, doing God's work on the pointy end of the legal system, our buddy Zeke Webster. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fine, Andrew. Nice to see you.
The system hasn't ground you down yet, I hope. You're doing okay down there?
I think so. We'll see how it goes.
Good deal. Wanted to ask you about this because we were kicking around on Twitter yesterday. There was a hearing, and you already know my stance on hearings. I think there's nothing more worthless in most cases than a senatorial hearing. They're trying to pass a couple of judges. And in fact, they were doing 3 judges, but everybody was focusing on one appointee, Nina Morrison. She's an appointee for the Eastern District up in New York, I believe. And we watched senator after senator on the Republican side start attacking her as being soft on crime because she wants to get people out of jail. The problem here is this is not just a criminal defense attorney. This is a woman who has spent 20 years on the Innocence Project. All the people she's getting out of jail are innocent. You know more about the Innocence Project than I do. You deal with the part of the criminal justice system that tends to lap up quite a few innocent people, or at least trump up worse than maybe the crimes they did. Explain for us, when you hear that as an attorney and as a defender, Innocence Project and getting that lumped in with rising crime, how that lands with you.
I mean, it's one of those things where it's so wrong that it's kind of hard to know where to start. But it's not something that a serious person would say. And honestly, I suspect that these senators, I suspect they don't really believe what they're saying. If they do, that is probably worse. But the fact is, for somebody that has been convicted in court by a jury and exhausted their appeals and all this kind of stuff, to then prove actual innocence with the amount of conclusive evidence that you would need to actually have your sentence overturned and be released, that's not happening on technicalities. It's not happening on close cases or anything like that. It's happening in cases primarily because of DNA evidence, where you have absolute, scientific proof that this is not the person that did it. So the kind of cases that the Innocence Project takes, and the kind of cases where they actually win, I mean, those are cases where people spend decades in prison, convicted of horrible, horrible crimes that they had absolutely nothing to do with whatsoever. And it's not a left liberal, out there position to say that that's a horrible thing to have happen to anyone anywhere. And that not only is it good work to release people from prison who have been wrongfully convicted, but that it's awful that the work needs to be done in the first place, and that we need to do more to compensate people that have this happen to them for what they went through, and to prevent it from happening to other people in the future. And again, like I'm a public defender. I have a bunch of unpopular opinions about the criminal justice system. I'm aware of that. I understand it. I don't expect Ted Cruz and the like to like what I do for a living, or to think that what I do for a living is good. But when you're talking about somebody that has spent 20 years getting factually innocent people out of prison, that there's just not an honest way to think of that as a bad thing to do. And it's especially ridiculous to try and somehow blame that for rising crime rates or anything like that.
I also find this is one of those things with me where I think this is just beyond politics. I think this gets into performative, and it gets into people trying to make things that aren't there. Like, this is incongruent to me, because if you have people who won't discuss things like how our criminal justice system is better at making criminals than it is at exonerating innocent people. And we've talked about that with you before, because you're on the public defender side of that, where people get sucked in the system and don't have a way out in a lot of cases. And then they want to turn around and do this, of all people, against somebody. And I really don't care if she's a liberal or a progressive jurist, I don't really care at this point. just the Innocence Project and trying to exonerate innocent people is not rising the crime rate. Like that's the opposite of the crime rate. If we're going to argue, and I do on this program, and some of my friends on the right get a little aggravated with me, if we're going to argue that part of the problem with the criminal justice system is we're making more criminals than we are preventing crime, the Innocence Project sure seems like to be one of those things we should be kind of bipartisan on, and like, yeah, let's get all the innocent people out of the system.
Well, sure. And I mean, the corollary to that is that every time somebody is wrongfully convicted of a rape or a murder or something like that, that means that the person who really did it got away with it. If Cruz and Hawley and Cotton were, trying in good faith to talk factually about crime and punishment and the legal system and so forth, they might care about that, but that's not what they're doing. They're just trying to, get attention and to make political hay out of how all these terrible liberals are letting criminals get out and making our streets more dangerous and whatever the demagoguery currently is. Never mind the fact that they're letting people out who didn't actually do what they were in prison for. It's disgusting.
Yeah, we're talking to our buddy Zeke Webster, who's an attorney and a public defender on purpose. He's not one of those guys that doesn't have a better option. He's passionate about this kind of stuff just to get rid of that trope. To be clear here, we're working off the reporting of Jennifer Bendery and a couple other people because the way the Senate hearing, we probably won't have the transcript for this for a day or two. So if any of this proves inaccurate, we'll go back and touch on it. But I want to touch on a couple of the things that are being said in this based off the reporting. I like the way she wrote it, so I'll just read it verbatim. Murderers, throwing rocks, gasoline, assault, looters, rioting. Those are all in quotes. Hawley's just over here saying a string of scary words about crimes as Morrison sits there. I can't accept your support your nomination or anyone else who has softened crime. Hawley dramatically declares because it is, and this is a quote, pattern with this administration. There's a way to attack the Biden administration. We know Joe Biden had a lot to do with the 90s crime bill, which is a big part of where we're at in criminal justice and social justice right now. That's its own separate thing. But this is just kind of lazy rhetoric, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is kind of a trope that you see in the politics of crime and the politics of the legal system and so on and so forth, that is kind of built around this assumption that you have, on the one hand, good, honest, law-abiding citizens, and then on the other hand, you have criminals, which are a totally distinct group from the first group. And they are dangerous people, and you need to keep the first group safe from the second group. And that's what this is all about. And I don't think, to begin with, I don't think that way of looking at the world is at all supported by any kind of facts about how different types of crimes do and don't actually take place. But it's a way of thinking about the world that I think has a lot of kind of emotional pull for especially people on the political right. And what I think is going on here is they're just firing off buzzwords that fit into that frame. That if somebody's been convicted of murder and they went to prison and now these terrible liberals are letting them out. And the fact that they didn't actually murder anybody it doesn't matter when in terms of the type of political rhetoric and the type of political positioning that is coming from these particular people, because it's not about any kind of good faith effort to do anything. It's just there was a bunch of bad, scary criminals out there, and we want to lock them up, and those liberals and Joe Biden want to let them go. That's all the argument is.
Let's drill down on that, though, because I find it one of the reasons I talk about, people ask me is like, well, why do you talk about things like, prosecution cases and Supreme Court? I don't think people realize it, and I realize it because I've had it happen to people I love, so maybe that's why I have an understanding of it. You're one police officer having a cranky day. You're one overzealous prosecutor. You're one mistake. I don't care how righteous your life is. You are one misstep away from going into a system, and then you're at the mercy of the system. You can get a bad judge. You can get bad representation. You can get bad counsel. There's all kinds of good people that did a bad thing that wind up in the criminal justice system. How do we change the language and the paradigm on this thing? Like you just said, there's too many people that just want to be like, oh, criminals are this subclass of human beings way over there. They're not, though. They're your friends, your neighbors, your family members. They're one addiction, one mistake, one accident away from being a criminal by the letter of the law. How do we change that perception?
I mean, I I don't really know. All I know how to do is to just keep, saying this kind of thing to everybody that's willing to listen to me. But and the one thing I'd add to that is it's not just. I don't even think it's true that everybody is like one mistake away. I think if you go through the criminal statutes of pretty much any state in the nation, you will find that almost everyone, in fact, I think probably everyone, has at minimum committed crimes and gotten away with it, and most likely committed felonies and got away with it. Now, I'm not saying that everybody's a rapist or a murderer, but there's a lot more that is a violation of the criminal code than that. And almost certainly you and I and everybody else you might talk to in your day-to-day have done things that are technically a violation of the criminal law. Most of us get away with it. And for most of it, it's kind of assumed that you get away with it. And that's the fact that most people get away with it is what makes it okay to have laws that are constructed in the ways that they are. But I think that it's really important to think about it that way. And also to think about the fact that even when you're talking about much more serious crimes, like your rapes and your murders and your things like that, these sorts of things are usually done by people who are themselves the victims of crimes to people that they know. There's the kind of an image of the scary guy on the street corner, or somebody cruising around in an unmarked van picking up kids or whatever it may be. And it's not that there's no truth at all to that, but most of the time everything is a lot more human and a lot more intimate and in a way normal. That just these are things that people sometimes do for all sorts of different reasons, some better and worse than others. And for that reason, I think that you have to think about people that are accused of crimes, both who have done that and who haven't, as people, and see the commonality we share and the ways in which the system that we have constructed is not very good at recognizing any of those realities.
Yeah, Zeke Webster's joining us, our friend who always touches in with us on matters of criminal justice. When we come back, we're going to delve into that system a little bit more. We're going to talk about the confirmation hearing process. It keeps coming up in the news. We better deal with it. We'll talk about this nominee specifically and talk more about the Innocence Project and our Congress critters, who are, by the way, all lawyers themselves in this particular case, not covering themselves in legal glory. We'll get into all that. Zeke Webster right after this. Welcome back to Heard Tell. We're talking about this Nina Morrison hearing. To be fair, she was actually up with 3 other judges because this was going to be kind of a pro forma type of nomination hearing, but it's televised and senators are running for president, so we got to get it on TV. Is this a healthy way to do judges? I know by law and by the Constitution we have to do a nomination process, but is there a better way to do this? Should this be off camera? Should it be a select committee of senators instead of, the standing Judiciary Committee? Because it seems like, and I'm bringing this up for a reason, because we're getting ready to do a Supreme Court nomination process, and we all know how much fun and games those are. Is there a better way to do this? I know the law prescribes a lot of this, but there's got to be some tweaking we can do to this, right?
Feels like there's got to be. I think that we've reached a point where judicial confirmation hearings are almost entirely useless. This is low even by the standards of modern judicial confirmation hearings. But it's a broken process that doesn't really provide any kind of meaningful information to the public. Doesn't leave us with a better federal bench than we would have if the process as it exists didn't happen at all. I don't know exactly what a better system looks like, but it's hard to imagine it being worse.
Yeah, let's talk about this specific nominee for just a second. Again, I don't know. I haven't dug into her caseload because they're not attacking her on her judicial views. If she was, then we'd take those up in discussion. That's what you do in a normal hearing. You take their body of work and go, okay, this person is way too bad on this issue, da-da-da-da-da. But they're not doing that. They're attacking her for being part of the Innocence Project. But I'm looking at her CV, if you will, here. Yale undergrad, New York U Law School. She clerked for the Second Circuit. There's been people with lots thinner resumes get district judgeships, lifetime appointments. She has been a part of the Innocence Project for 20 years plus. It's the bulk of her career work. If you're going to attack her on anything, you could say maybe she doesn't have that much appellate experience. But as you were telling me earlier when we were prepping for this, the way the Innocence Project has to get people out of prison, that is heavy appellate work.
Yeah, it's, again, there's not really I don't think that there's a serious attack to be made on whether somebody with this resume has enough experience to be a federal judge. And that's why that's not what we're seeing. We're just seeing demagoguery about, how we need to be tougher on crime. And apparently that includes locking up people for things that they didn't do.
I hate to do this because I don't normally like to just work off tweets, but we have to because this is a live hearing that's going on when we're recording this. I'm working off the reporting of Jennifer Bendery, who's an excellent legal reporter for Huffington Post. There's two items I want to bring to your attention and get your reaction to. The first one was Ted Cruz. And again, the three major offenders we're talking about here are Josh Hawley of Northern Virginia, but ostensibly from Missouri, even though he doesn't live there, Ted Cruz of Texas, and Tom Cotton of Arkansas. By the way, all three of those guys are going to be running for president in a couple of years, or at least thinking about it. Ted Cruz already has. Ted Cruz attacked her for being soft on crime. Morrison noted, and I'm going to quote here from the reporting, she said that in Cruz's home state, Republicans, because it's a Republican-controlled state, unanimously passed a law named after one of her former clients who helped wrongfully accuse people access exculpatory evidence in cases when proven misconduct. And then Tom Cotton had this exchange, and this is the one that really kind of burned me up, and I want your reaction to it. Tom Cotton, this is a direct quote. "Are you proud that you encouraged such defiance in convicted murderers?" he asked, referencing the man executed in Arkansas who made a snarky comment to the warden before being put to death. Morrison noted that there was, quote, significant DNA evidence this man who was executed, Lendell Lee, I actually remember when that case hit the news, was innocent. Cotton knew this, but he just kept describing the details of the heinous crime he was guilty of. Cotton, acting out of outrage, said, quote, "Compelling evidence that the courts somehow overlooked." Morrison replied, "I've repped many people exonerated by DNA evidence who lost dozens of appeals in courts because DNA wasn't available." Cotton comes back and says this is a direct quote, "He was convicted based on eyewitness testimony." I'll remind everybody, Tom Cotton is an attorney. He's a member of the bar. He knows better than this. Morrison calmly replied, this is another direct quote, "Eyewitness identification, which you referenced, is actually the single leading proven cause of wrongful conviction." I've got nothing here. Why in the world are you going to the wall for people who either are innocent or there's some suspicion of innocent and acting like they don't have a legal right to try to prove they're innocent down the wall, especially somebody with a death sentence? If you convict them, fine, and we could talk about the death penalty some other case, but if I think I'm innocent and I got convicted to death, I think I'm going to let a snarky comment slide, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, the Republican Party is a party that talks an awful lot about freedom. And, it's hard to imagine a more thorough level of deprivation of that for the government to publicly claim that you did a horrible thing you didn't do, and then destroy your reputation, convince a huge number of people that you're a total monster, lock you in a cage for decades, and then take your life. And that's a level of mistreatment by the government, a level of tyranny that most of us can barely even imagine happening to ourselves, especially for people that live comfortable lives and worry about how much they're going to have to pay in taxes the next year, something like that. We're talking about somebody who's had their entire life, their entire reputation completely destroyed by the government over nothing, over either a mistake at best or maybe even something more malicious than that. I think the least that somebody in that situation should be able to get is a snarky comment about what happened to them. But beyond that, I'd say that the United States Congress in the 90s passed something called the anti-terror. If I'm trying to get this right, I believe it's the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act, which specifically makes it more difficult for people that have been convicted of serious crimes to raise appellate challenges claiming that they had been wrongfully convicted. And the sorts of conservative judges that Cruz and Cotton and Hawley support putting on the Supreme Court have been very consistent in their jurisprudence. That they've said that some of them have said that it is not a violation of the Constitution for an innocent person to be put to death for something they didn't do. And so, in fact, I think that there's some level where they've been fairly consistent. That they make it more difficult for people who have been wrongfully convicted to press claims of innocence, and then when these procedural bars are successful and they allow states to execute innocent people, then these particular senators act like it's somehow offensive to their sensibilities for the innocent person to even say anything unkind about the government that took their life for nothing. And yeah, I don't really have anything more to say, because I think that kind of behavior, to describe it is to refute it, and should give you a pretty clear idea of how I feel about people that do sorts of things like that with public life.
To loop this back to where we started and to bring it to more of a practical level, though, when we have our elected officials dealing with the criminal justice system like this, and I know it's a hearing, so it's performative, but people see this and they're going to run for office off these clips, and the reason they're saying this stuff is because they're going to put it in a fundraising clip, and by the end of this day, this will be on YouTube and Twitter and wherever. When you have our elected leaders talking about the criminal justice system like this, how much harder does that make it for somebody like you that's on the other end of it, where you don't have the fancy hearings and you don't have the big courtrooms and you don't have the judgeships? You have real people in your communities that are getting put into a system that everything is against them, and they don't have those resources like those lawyers sitting up on the dais in the Senate. And there really is innocent people getting wrapped up, or it just as bad, in my opinion, you have people with petty crimes or mistakes that get turned into career criminals because of the way our system isn't being reformed, when everybody agrees it needs to be reformed. They just don't want to do the hard work for it. Talk about how that trickles down, because the mess at the bottom is directly related to the lack of focus at the top for anybody to actually get any change going on this, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, you see this attitude on a daily basis at every level of the criminal justice system, or excuse me, the criminal legal system is what I prefer to call it. You know, it is a routine part of my job that I will have somebody accused of a relatively minor crime where I've been given no actual account of what the evidence against my client even looks like. And I'll be trying to, get my client out of jail on a reduced bond so that they don't have to, serve their sentence before they even get a day in court to be heard. And the default position of pretty much every DA that I have to deal with, and most of the judges that I have to deal with, is that the very fact that somebody has been charged means that whatever it is that the charging document alleges that they did, yeah, that must be true, and that must be what happened. And we know that's not true. We know that, people get things wrong. People are falsely accused. There's a lot of ways that that people who are entirely innocent can get charged with things. And the same attitude that you're seeing in these hearings, I mean, it creeps down into any kind of just day-to-day operation of any criminal court. If you go to court and watch, you'll see it. I guarantee it. And I don't really know what the antidote is, other than that, people need to pay attention they need to pay attention to when we do find proof that that outcomes were reached that were wrong, when we do see people get acquitted, and just think about what that means for everybody else that's moving through the system, where for one reason or another that you don't quite get that accounting.
Yeah, I'll fall back on something even simpler, because I'm not a lawyer like you, so I like little simple phrases so I can understand them better than all the Latin and so forth. But they're telling us who they are, so we should just believe them. So when Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley and whoever else sits up there, and I know they're lawyers, and I know they've all been in Congress for quite a while, and I know they know better than what they're saying, and they're telling me these things, I think I'll just believe them that this is what they are. And I'll judge them accordingly. I hope everybody else does. Zeke Webster, we always appreciate your insight on things like this. You did this one on short notice. Really appreciate it. Let folks know where they can follow you on social media and elsewhere, my friend.
Oh, I'm on Twitter at Don Zico. I've published a couple things at Ordinary Times and Balls and Strikes. It's not hard. Just give me a Google.
Give him a Google. We always appreciate your time, my friend. You are consistent in your beliefs, and I respect and appreciate it, and look forward to having you on again. One of these days we'll get you on something on a nice light topic that doesn't involve all this heavy stuff. But until then, we sure appreciate your time, my friend. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Take care.